Podcast, the podcast that invites Talanoa conversations about various access to equities within the context of Aotearoa. We invite guests such as yourself and our beautiful guest today to share their lived experience in an effort to identify common threads within support systems, social networks, and knowledge that uplifts the collective human experience. Kelsey, what's up?
So in season 1, we've got one overarching question, which is, what does equity and support look like for various communities coexisting within one society?
And today we are so thankful for the fighting spirit. Without further ado, we're going to gift it to you to just center us and introduce yourself and finish the sentence, I am.
I am Māori and I am gorgeous and I am a mother. There you go. Ka pai?
Ka pai.
Ka pai.
All right, so feel free to start us off with any of your centering spaces or rituals that brings you to be the best you that you can be.
Kia ora. Papa ki Tuihana, nā tai ki maua, e neke neke hia, I nuku nuku hia, if you are re hia, e hotu. Awahine rua ki te wai, ki tai wiwi, ki tai wawa, ki te whai ao, ki te ao marama, ti hei Māori ora, ti hei Māori ora. E mihi ana kia. Korua. It's beautiful to be here today. Ko Tuihana Ohia tōku ingoa no Ngati Pukenga me Ngāi te Rangi me te Arawa o ku iwi. I grew up and spent some time here in Aotearoa, but as a young child immigrated across to Melbourne, Australia. So you hear when I say Australia, it sounds a bit kind of very Australian.
Australian.
But yeah, I've been back in Aotearoa 20 years. I'm a mother of a blended family of 4 boys. Keanu, who's been born and bred in Melbourne. My family have been in Melbourne for 43 years. Māori on my father's side and European on my mother's side. Very close to both sides of my family. And yeah, we, where was I going? And yeah, I've got 4 boys, 28, Melbourne, Keanu, and then 3 here. Mauriora, who's 17 going on 18, Makizuk, or aka Baba, who is 16, and then Nikora Paku, so little Nikora, who's 6. And so, yeah, I'm a mum, an auntie, a cousin, a sister, and I grew up with a brother, Tama, and he's 18 months younger than me, and then we've got a little sister who's the same age as my son, so my oldest son is 28. So I know I look shit hot amazing for my age, just saying.
Bomb.
If I do say so myself.
No, you can, and you should. Check out the photo after this.
So that little introduction was actually our grandfather when he spoke on the marae. That's what he would open with. Women from or wahine from our marae, we sing it. And it's just really telling people who we are and where we're from. So, yeah, I'm very proudly Māori, but also very proudly European.
Kia ora.
So, yeah, that's a bit about me. If there's anything more, I'm sure we're going to learn lots more as we go along. Hey? Huh?
Yes, of course.
Something we ask all our guests is, what are their pronouns?
Pronouns.
Yes, let's go there, eh?
Okay. Her, she, and wonderful.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
I like that because it's simple, and at the same time it really uplifts you and your essence.
Yes.
And I feel like for me, I'm really about the whole cheerleading yourself.
Yeah. I just think that, everyone should shine in their light, whatever their light is for them, but just shine in your light. And it's taken me a little while to realise that it's okay to shine in my light. So, I'm a bit of a positive bunny. So, positive manu. So, yeah. Okay.
All right. And so talk to us about what community is for you and what all the different communities that are have supported you in your journey or have uplifted you, added value to your journey so far in life? So time's not a hindrance, so it could be from your childhood all the way to where you are right now.
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up, we were very loved children. So we were the only grandchildren on my European side of the whānau for 22 years. So it was my brother and I, and we were incredibly loved. We had a grandmother who just adored us, and because she adored us, our auntie adored us, and our uncles, so my mum's sister and 2 brothers. And we grew up with them on a little farm outside of Dannevirke in a place called Weber. And, they did things like, when I think about that as a kid, they flew us from Tauranga down to Palmerston North for holidays. Now, that's in the 70s, and we thought nothing of it, but that was actually a big deal back then when I think about it now, because that was kind of a bit flash, right?
Yeah,
But
it must have been hella expensive too.
It would have been hella expensive, but our grandparents loved us so much they'd fly us home every now and then for school holidays.
Nice.
I know. We also used to drive, and I can remember driving and counting the towns, But at the age, to get there. But we also grew up in Patterson Street in Mount Maunganui, in what was then known, and those that have lived there for a long time, as Arataki. And we had a lovely life there. One of my favourite memories is picking pipi and spitting watermelon pips out, because we weren't allowed to spit. Our mother was quite proper, and we weren't allowed to spit. And and I was a kid too that I never wore pants, so I didn't wear pants until I was 8 years old. And I know everyone's like, what the heck? So you could say, and I was very loved by my koro, because we were the only grandchildren that lived at the time near my nana and koro. So we had this just this overwhelming amount of love that we encountered as children, but at home our life was quite different, because we had a father that was challenging. He was quite a violent man. But the funny thing is when I talk about that, I'm at the same time I'm saying that, I'm saying, oh, he's loved us so much. And he did. He absolutely adored us. But then at the age of 8.5, so we left behind that community, this familiar community. My mum actually got us on the plane without telling our koro that we were immigrating to Australia. And
wow, what was that like?
Well, Mum tells a story about how she ran koro from the airport, because koro had basically said, don't take my mokopuna away from me. And she ran koro to say, oh, we're on a plane to Australia, because my dad had left 6 months earlier. And so we were going over. And we went from a little seaside town and having these loving grandparents to Hawthorne, which in Melbourne is inner city suburb, living in a flat 3 stories up. We thought it was a wonderful adventure.
Yeah.
And some of the iconic things, if you're from Melbourne and know Melbourne, there's a skipping rope girl, and we used to be able to see her from our flat, and we remember that quite distinctly. And we moved to Hawthorne, and that it was a huge culture shock. We were very lucky though, because we had a Tongana family that moved into a bunch of flats, a couple of flats down the road. And because they come from Auckland, we just naturally, and we're still friends with them to this day.
Nice.
So,
So building new communities in a different space.
Absolutely. So, and so we went from a very kind of, I suppose, 2-dimensional cultural community, European and Māori, to this incredibly multicultural community. Like, we stayed in Hawthorne for a short while and then moved to Kew. And Kew was kind of considered quite a flash suburb, as was Hawthorne. But we lived in the shittiest house in the suburb. I can tell you, it was a terrible home. But a house, but it was a beautiful home. So, and we ended up going to a high school which was 69% Greek. And in my class there were Cyprians, Greeks, Italians, Egyptians, Chinese, a few Australians, Yugoslavians, Macedonians, Croatians, Serbians. Like, it was just this, huge kind of, multicultural community that I'm incredibly grateful for. And then as we left high school, it went from Greek to predominantly Vietnamese. Because a lot of kids came in from Richmond, because Richmond High School was really dodgy, so they all came to Q High School. And so, yeah, when I say our community, we grew up in a community with my parents that was incredibly multicultural, and I believe that it's really held us in good stead as we've grown older in life, because my tolerance for multiculturalism is, I just think it's kind of doesn't, I don't think about it as tolerance, because I think of it as normal. Multiculturalism is normal. I grew up in, going to the Queen Victoria Market. I don't know if you've ever been there in Melbourne. We used to walk in and they'd be like, $5 chops, and they'd be screaming out, and there was all these smells and all these different languages being spoken, and everyone had their trolleys, and it was hot jam donuts and things like that. And I think it just really opened our world view of and because I lived there for 22 years, and in the 22 years I lived there, only once did I get picked my nationality. Otherwise I could have been anyone or anything, because it was such a melting pot of different nationalities, and I never encountered anything racial. My brother did, because he was more olive skin than I. And then if my dad came into the school, everyone was like, "Oh my God, he like black." And he's not even black, But the only time I ever encountered it was actually my first job, and somebody asked me if my father was the colour of midnight or the colour of 6 o'clock, and I didn't know what they were asking me. And then I realised and got really upset and ended up getting a formal apology. Now, today no one would do that, but back in the day that was, I was only 18.
Wow.
And but yeah, I mean, Melbourne, in terms of, we also had a bunch of really close friends that mum and dad had managed to surround themselves with, who were predominantly from Mount Maunganui. And we had family that would come over, and dad mostly got boys, and dad would put them to work and stuff and say, you got 2 weeks. But our community, like we had Vince who lived across the road. He was Italian, and we had Mark and Shane who lived across the road, and they were Italian Australian, I think. And then Helen lived around the corner, and she was Italian. And then Michael Zezula lived over the road, or a couple of roads over, and I think he might have been Yugoslavian. And so it was really normal for us as kids to just have this community of friends who were all sorts of different nationalities. And actually, mum and dad, if we talk about sexuality, mum and dad we had a group of friends, and Rick and Jeff were a gay couple. So as kids growing up, I'm sure gay is not the right word, but we grew up not only in a multicultural environment where our parents really exposed us to it. We also had a group of real Kiwi friends, Māori Pākehā, and then we had another group of friends who, it didn't matter if you were gay, straight, or whatever. Dad and mum just had this really, I now when I look back at it, I'm super, super grateful for it. Right? And it had a huge impact on us, because I think that it's made us really, like, as I said, very open-minded about multiculturalism and about the this is the LGBTQTRSUVW world. I'm not quite sure of the right terminology, but it's made us, what I think anyway, quite open to that kind of view. We don't really, so that was, and then I came, sorry, do you want me to keep talking?
Yeah.
Or do you want to interrupt me any
No,
old time?
we're
so
happy.
invested.
I'm like,
okay.
And what next?
tell us more, okay?
So, I mean, and then, I married a beautiful Samoan man, but shortly after we married, we broke up. And Rodney was probably, actually, I don't talk about it much, but he really was very well suited. But there was just something missing, I think. And we were both fairly young, at 22. So I'm one of those people who, my number is this, but probably my maturity is a good 10 years younger. So, at 22 when I have a baby, I'm probably really not that mature. And I'd never really wanted children. And here I am sitting here today with 4 boys. So anyway, and I had, and at the age of, and I'd been coming back to New Zealand, to Aotearoa, And the more I came back, the more I kept wanting to stay, and I couldn't work out what it was. Like I was like, because I was just like, oh, why would I want to live there? Because I've got this, at the time, super glamorous job working for the National Gallery of Victoria, like super flat. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so jealous.
Yeah, super duper poncy, right? and
It's the first place I went when I went to Aussie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Way back.
Yeah, so I worked there. And it was super gorgeous, just have to say, super glamorous. And I had a lovely husband, like life scene, and I just, every time I came back, I just wanted to stay. And I was just like, I do not understand what is going on because my knowledge of things Māori were really limited. We're really, really, really limited. So Dad used to say, haere ki te moe. We grew up with him making hangi all around Melbourne. We definitely grew up with Māori around us in Melbourne. But in terms of tikanga or, world Māori perspective, like a te ao Māori perspective, oh, heck no. I can remember him hearing for the first time that they changed the name from Taupo to Taupo, and him going, hey, the heck do those Maoris think they are back there? And so I suppose my personal, and I don't want to talk on behalf of my brother, but my personal view of Māori was that I loved them and I knew I was, but it was kind of something that was nice to have, but I don't really know if I really want to be that Maori, if I'm being really honest.
Yeah, thank you.
And so, so I had all these terrible stereotypes of what our people were. So here I was so accepting of multiculturalism, but little did I know I had this terrible bias and judgment towards my own. And so I had a cousin, Puawai Cairns. She's super duper fabulous. And she said, I'm wondering whether you should come back and live back here. So I came back in 2000, September 2000. We were celebrating our koro's 80th. It must have been August. He would have been 80, yeah. So we were celebrating his 80th, and I made a decision to then let my dad and my stepmother return with Keanu back to Melbourne. So he's the oldest mokopuna of my parents, and my parents said to me, oh, no, you're not taking our moko back to live there. And my Rodney had said, I'm losing you, so I'm not going to lose him too. So, and to be honest, this is another thing. I was a shithouse mum. I loved him, but I wasn't really vested in him, if you know what I mean. Not the way I think I could have been or should have been. And there was a lot of judgment at the time because it was quite controversial for me to leave. Our marriage had broken up, but to leave behind my son and all my immediate family. So all my immediate family were there, to come back here. But I had 4 grandparents at that time still alive. So I just up and left my glamorous job and just up and came to Aotearoa in September 2020.
So what would you say be the most, like, the tipping point of you making that decision? Because that's obviously not an overnight decision. Like, that must have been mulling a little bit.
It was mulling. I remember being at a train station in Melbourne. I don't think it was Parliament. I think it was Flagstaff. They had an underground loopy thing. And I remember standing there on the platform and this lady starting up a conversation with me. And we were having this amazing conversation. And then she turned around and said, oh, by the way, I'm a Christian. Do you want to come to my church? Right?
Oh, my gosh.
And I remember being...
False sense of security.
I remember being so brassed off. I'm being really careful not to swear.
You can swear. It's fine. We don't care.
Really brassed off. Really pissed off, actually, because I felt like she'd misguided. She had... the intention... Yeah, there was an agenda. The intention was to get me to go to... And I turned to her and I remember saying, well, right now I'm going through a phase of my life where I think it's more important that I learn about my culture and my language. And I'm actually going to return to New Zealand and I'm going to learn who I am. And for me, that is more important than learning about your Christian beliefs at the moment.
Shit. What was her response?
And she said, oh, and I said, so we can either continue to have the awesome conversation we were having, or I would ask that we stop the conversation if you're going to then preach to me about Christianity. And she decided chose to leave. So that was that. My grandmother, my granny Mikazak, and my granddad, who's still alive, by the way, and 100.
Whoa.
Wait.
Good work.
Yes, I've got one grandparent still alive, and he's Lawrence McKissick, and he lives in Algiers Bay in a elderly facility, and he's 100.
Wow.
Yeah, and today I'm wearing my granny's engagement ring. So
The whaanau, the ancestors are in the room. No
they
wonder.
are so in the room, right? And my nana, who was a bit of a battle axe, but we loved her to bits, and Koro too. So where was I? God, that just
Can I
went off
just
into
also
the-
ask, was that the first time you articulated that in
Yes.
confidence to someone else?
Yes.
Because it's, for me, I feel like all of there's a lot of moments that are pivotal in my life, but I always articulate it to strangers better than my own family and to myself even. I'm just like,
So my family weren't thinking that they had no awareness that had been starting to have this pull. I did not share this with my family.
well, it must have been scary because that's the first, it's like everything that you're raised with, and then this calling home
yeah.
is like,
And can I tell you something?
Go
That
there.
my dad told me years later that my dad, he pined for me after I left to come back here for about 2 to 3 years.
Wow.
He was so brokenhearted. But now, what a blessing it's been. It's been such a blessing to all of our whānau in a funny kind of roundabout way. But yeah. That was probably, you're right, Joe. That was the first time that I'd really articulated and said exactly what I wanted to do and what I was going to do. And it was a big deal because the gallery, no one ever left the gallery because it was so amazing to work at. And I remember my boss being Ruth Davidson, she was so upset that I was leaving. And I saw all the ladies that I worked with, all these private school bloody Prada, Chanel wearing blicking chicks. But they were beautiful. Susan Bowie, Elizabeth Langley. I remember all of them. They were, Judy Williams, who I think is still there. They were just amazing women. But yeah, I remember coming home and you know what? I remember being okay that my parents were taking my son. Oh, that sounds so terrible. I would never let that happen now. And I didn't want them to take him. But I, basically I'd felt like at the time I probably didn't have the choice. Yeah, my family made that decision. And, but yeah, that was my big decision to come back, to be courageous enough to come back. So I've immigrated twice in my life. Once from here to Melbourne. And my mum made us all matching outfits, just FYI, when we got off the plane. And then immigrating back in 2000. So 1978 and then again in 2000. Yeah, immigrated back. And, I went from coming back here, and in the first 6 weeks I was back here, I was suddenly living with Māori in Hamilton East. I was living with Māori. My cousin Bentham had come up and grabbed me from Tāmaki Makaurau, where I was kind of just temping and doing what and saying, no, I think you need to come down and live by us. So I was flatting with my friend Leonie, my cousin Leonie, her friend. She said, yeah, I've got a room, so flat with me. So flatted in Hamilton East. I met the baby daddy and my 2 teenagers, and I was suddenly working for Talanoa, Aotearoa, which at that time only had 5,000 students and was this tiny little organisation in this beautiful building based out of Te Awamutu. And it was a massive culture shock. Like, I can't even explain what that was like. I might have not even known anything about our culture, and I didn't. Like, I couldn't say wānanga. I just didn't know a thing. And I thought I knew everything. I was what I could sometimes I've referred to as quite a bit of an arrogant, snot-nosed, snobby, up herself Australian Māori. That's how I would have described myself. Yeah. Yeah.
And when you moved into that wānanga space, what kind of support was there
I
to
think,
help you,
No.
kind of move out of that?
oh no, they didn't.
Snobby snob.
Well, they went. They didn't like me at all.
Mm.
If I'm being honest. I mean, there's a lady there now, Cherie Kavanagh. She's still there after flipping I don't know how many years, but she always tells me, "Oh yeah, you were like this Aussie that had this Aussie accent, but you spoke so posh." And I was, and you always dressed like all in black. So in Melbourne, black's a real colour, right?
Yeah.
It's a real colour, and everyone wears it. Well, I didn't know black was a tangi colour, like So they used to give me shit about, oh, you weren't going to tangi today, And
I feel like you were educating like representation of Māori in different colours and different facets before it was cool.
yep,
Do you know what I mean?
maybe.
Like you were already breaking stereotypes in a space where, Māori didn't know how to support white passing looking Māoris.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
So I
and-
feel like you challenged it. Like it was a political stance because it was like you're there and you're like, I am Māori and I don't have to, prove it. But it's like it was everyone around you didn't know how to cater to someone who was removed from their lands or
Yeah.
removed from their tikanga or removed from their spaces.
and like I remember sitting on a table for the first time.
Oh
Oh
my.
my god! In the
Oh, so you just went and
You
just
would've got the
dismantled all the
jandal, eh?
tikanga.
yeah, like I Leslie Marahi, like she was like, get
What
off
are
the
you
table,
doing? Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like, and why? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And why?
Mm.
And she was like, because that's, and then she explained it to me.
Mm.
And there were things like at the wānanga back in the day, you had the you had the whakapapa or the history of the wānanga that sat in front of you. So you always knew, where it was from and who you were. And but I think a real pivotal point for me was when Bentham and Katie took me to a noho marae in February 2001 to a kapahaka group called Rangi.
Mm.
And what had happened is when I'd met the baby daddy of my two teenage sons, we were back at his place, we'd been out partying all night, had a good time. And he said, oh, how about we watch this video? And I said, sure. And I remember him putting the video on and he said, oh, this is kapahaka. And I was like, oh, what is kapahaka?
Mm.
And he was like, oh, it's like where they do poi. And I knew enough because Dad had actually taught kapahaka when we lived back here. And I said, oh yeah, no, I kind of know what it is. Anyway, so we're watching this video. You got to remember we haven't been dating. We actually weren't dating. We were just, having a bit of fun.
Mm.
And I was Tuihana and he was ora. That's all I knew. And then this video pops up and I'm like, oh, there's my cousin Watson. There's my cousin Bentham, my cousin Rihari, and their wives, Katie and Michelle. And he turned around and he said to me, oh my fuck, what's your surname? And I said, I'm Tuihana Ohia. And he was like, oh. So unbeknown to me, his cousins were the leaders of this kapahaka group of which my first cousins were part of. So his first cousins were the leaders and my first cousins were part of the kapahaka.
Mm.
So then he knew he probably
Small
couldn't
world,
just play around with me, that I actually had to probably like call me his girlfriend then,
Yeah.
So anyway.
Man, but when your ancestors come through though,
Right.
I'm like, that's another tohu. I'm like, boom.
Well,
Don't mess with me.
I have to tell you, I go to this noho marae,
Mm.
where suddenly I realised I'm one of the oldest. Right?
Did you actually the karanga?
Right? No.
I was going to say,
my God.
that would be an experience.
No, but we went into the wharenu and we had to kind of do whakawhanaungatanga. And I told them how much I didn't really enjoy children. I had this son. I loved my son, but, I'm not going to have any more and I don't really grieve to children very, very much. To a bunch of people who have all been brought up, like, kids, culturally, kids are pretty much number one. Well, I didn't know that, right? We loved anyway, and but also, my mind got blown, and stereotypes were distorted for me, or actually broken and crushed, and because sitting in this circle of people were doctors, lawyers, accountants, and teachers, very educated Māori, my age, most of them fluent in te reo, and most of them. It's a terrible word, but with a a half caste like myself. So suddenly I was like, huh? Suddenly, all these preconceived ideas and bias that I had to push aside. Right? I had to push aside real quick.
Yeah.
Right? And so that became another, but so alongside the wānanga, I ended up working for the wānanga for 16 and a half years.
How did that feel for you though? How did that feel for you when it was kind of like that mirror was right there?
Terribly uncomfortable and suddenly inadequate.
So how did you move in that space, or what?
So I suddenly felt really inadequate. But what had happened is that I'd been asked to go and learn a poi, Pānia Papa, had asked me to, and the marae we went to was Pohara Marae, and I was actually seeing Pānia's first cousin, Ora Papa. And it was my
These
first
connections.
Yeah, that was damn connections, all right. And so we went to, and they didn't know I was seeing their first cousin, Pānia, and them at this stage. We hadn't really gone public. And she said to me, "Oh, you can learn the poi." And this female character walked past me and said something real smart to me. Her name was Awhimai Hooker. In February 2001, we became inseparable. It's completely inseparable. Every noho, and even after noho, I worked at Tuihana Aotearoa and she was studying at Te Wharewananga Waikato. We just became an inseparable duo. And I think, well, I know that a lot of my learnings were not only from the people at the wānanga, but probably from hanging around with her a lot. Because she thought I was highly amusing because I didn't know a damn thing about anything, you know, in terms of te ao Māori. But it really disrupted my thinking, Joe, and it really made me a little bit angry towards my dad because I thought, what the fuck have you taught us? You haven't taught us anything. But he left New Zealand, he left Aotearoa in a time when and the way he'd been, you know, brought up, he talks about when he brought mum home and his grandfather telling him, "Great, you married Pākehā. It's better to do that." And him believing that it was better for us to be brought up with a more Pākehā perspective or mainstream perspective than it was a Māori one. So when we left New Zealand, kohangas and things like that were just starting out. But he had two brothers. One was in Tamatoa and the other one was leading the way in terms of education space, in terms of kura kaupapa. So he had John Ohia, Ringo, for those that know him, and Monty Ohia. But he just was like, nah, I don't want a part of that. So, you know, went to Australia. And there was a bit of anger, if I can be honest with you. And I rang Dad and said to him, "You were a violent asshole, controlling asshole, and actually you didn't teach us shit about our culture, right?" And he said, "Yeah, but we spoke. Once we spoke about it, that was it. That was healed, gone now. You know, we have to leave it behind because actually now we're going to open ourselves up to a whole lot of growth and learning. And man, it has been the most amazing thing learning about te ao Māori. And my biggest barrier has been about learning our language. And so the last 6 months I've made a real concerted effort to really to begin to instill actually put aside all those inhibitions of learning te reo and try and really open myself up to it, like lean into it and be okay in that comfortable space. But yeah, it was a really, you know, and then I did a cultural exchange with a group called Amo, which was run by Bentham and Katie, and we went across to New Mexico. It was my first time actually going officially overseas. And we did a cultural exchange in New Mexico with all the various Pueblo through there. And I remember being in the van and everyone Korero Māori except for me. And I had to learn the Lord's Prayer because we were doing a performance, you know. E tō mātou mātou te rangi. And us like going, "Come on, bro, you can learn it, bro, you can learn it. And learning that. And I'd performed at the Waikato Regionals in 2004 with Rangi. So there were all these things that happened, you know, all these. I went from a multicultural community to a very Māori looking community, but it was what I wanted, and I wanted to dive in deep. but I'd probably dove in deep through kapahaka and through the wānanga, and I learned, and actually in the midst of all of that I had 2 children. It was pretty much a single mother, and Ngāti Koreki Kahukura, I just have to, oh gosh, I'm probably going to get emotional and start crying, but they were like, I was never a soulmate mother. You know, their father, he had his own challenges and he was out and about doing his thing. But that family, that Koreki Kahukura whānau from Pohara Marae, they helped me to raise my children. You know, because I'm not the most maternal kind of a mum, but I absolutely adore my children. And but they took turns in helping me raise them. So I was never, ever, I'd never say I was solo, because I actually never was. And they'd just come and grab my children and help me. And then I had all the wānanga whānau. So between Ngāti Koreki Kahukura and actually my Ohia whānau too, when I go back to Tauranga. But my Tauranga moana whānau, but my Ngāti Koreki whānau and the wānanga whānau, they just helped me to raise my children. And while they were helping me raise my children, there was a lot of stuff that was going on for me. But I just, I think I did a lot of amazing things. I kept them connected to Pohara Marae, despite their father might have been coming and going. I kept, I'd jump in every kapaka thing there was. And, you got to understand, I couldn't speak te reo, but it's what I learnt about myself was that I could feel it. So I could feel the wairua of waiata, except I'm not a Mōtiatia fan, and I can just see everyone rolling their eyes at that. But just I could feel it. And so sometimes I didn't have to hear the English in order to understand what the waiata was about.
See, this is what I'm talking about in terms of senses, and when you're not gifted one sense, all the other senses become stronger.
Yeah.
So if you're not gifted the power to speak your own reo or your mother tongue, everything else, like I'm like, there's so many different multifaceted ways to become a native or to become an indigenous person of your own lands. And to me, I feel like you've really highlighted that for me in terms of just saying that, you couldn't speak your reo, but your singing ability came through. The way that you awhi came through, the way that you manaki came through.
I'm laughing because, in the Te Ao Māori world, my singing's probably really average, but I like to think it's quite good, but anyway.
Like I said, you got to cheerleader yourself, okay?
But I think, too, in the last couple of years, I've surrounded myself with, I eventually left the wānanga. I looked after Taora and was given, and I'm forever grateful to the likes of Lisa Murray and Harata Samuel, who really gave me a break to move away from what I'd worked in, which was the marketing, brand, comms, event space, and move into the Wellbeing space. And, in the 5 years I was kaitiaki of Taora, we won every award there was to win in the country for workplace wellbeing, and got to talk internationally and got to speak locally at conferences and all that kind of thing. But that, again, came back to what I realised in living here is that I love people. I get energy off people. Sometimes it's good to be alone and have peace and quiet, but I'm a real get me around people, love that energy, right? and so the thing is the wānanga gave me an opportunity to find that in myself as well. And then, now I've gone on to to project lead another award-winning piece of work with Vodafone, and now, we were talking earlier about well-being. To me, people tend to there's workplace well-being and then there's community and then there's whānau. Well, to me, it's all one of the same. And so,
Can you stretch that for us a little bit further? Because I feel like we would understand what you're saying, but mansplain it to us. What do you mean by it's all one and the same?
Well, do you walk into an office and go, okay, I'm in my workplace now, so there's a different approach to my workplace. I'm not the person I was before I walked through the door. And then am I different again when I'm with my whānau? But actually, you're always the same person no matter what spaces you're moving in. Yes, there might be a few alter egos that come in, but generally you're the same person with the same values, right? No matter what the environment is, no matter where you're placing yourself. So well-being, it's like, well, what the frick does that word mean? Well, I always think of it as hauora, So ho being your vital essence,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's also around your breath.
Mm.
And then ora meaning that you're well. So a lot of people talk about being in a state of moriora, you know, being in a state of where you're at complete peace and you're utterly open to things. But yeah, so I mean the wānanga, sorry, I keep jumping all over the place now, but the wānanga gave me an opportunity, and I really feel like that I've just learned and grown, and it's taken a lot for me to come to a place now at however old I am, to actually say I'm really good at this and I'm really good at this and I'm not so good at that. But it's taken me a long time. You know, I was talking to my 17-year-old the other day and I said, you know what, you are really good at a lot of things. I said, you're amazing to watch at wakaama. You're actually a beautiful singer and you're actually a really amazing son to your father and I. But only you can realise your amazingness. I can tell you. And I can tell you to tell it over and over again, but somewhere along the line you've got to find it yourself. And at the moment he's really trying to find who he is. And working in the wellbeing space, like I would happily do this mahi for the love because I'm incredibly passionate about it. But for me it's about touching souls. It's about touching people. And if I can influence one or two people, just imagine they're going to go and influence other people within either their workplaces or their families or the communities, and then you're going to have this ripple effect. Because I feel like sometimes there's this token kind of korero that happens around wellbeing. It's kind of a bit bullshitty, and really it is a holistic approach. And we can talk about mental health and wellbeing till the cows come home, and that is really incredibly essential. But in order to have that in a good place, you've got to have all the other things. You know, like if we look at the Te Whara Tapawha model, you know, and we mihi to Professor Mason Jury and his amazing work, you know, I've seen that taken way out of context on so many occasions within the mainstream environment. But he put it in the mainstream environment to help them understand us, to help them understand Māori. And I think that model is applicable to anyone, but it's about trying to have this balance, and that's what we're continually doing. You know, it's like learning. I'm like, I sit here today at 51, just starting to learn my culture. You know, I've become a stepmom to a 6-year-old when I thought I was kind of done and dusted for a few years. You know, and I mean, now I'm in this space with you guys. So, and I just love being in this space because I love being in the spaces that I'm in at the moment, because I really feel like I'm reaching out and, you know, kind of that song, reach out and touch somebody's hand, make this world a better place if you can. Like, well, okay, that's you know, if we're really going to do that, we really need to do that. So, yeah, well-being is a whole lot of things to me because, you know, and also it's just something I'm incredibly passionate about, and I find it difficult to articulate, because the reason I find it difficult to articulate is because well-being is different things to different people. It's just like sexuality is different things to different people.
100%.
Well-being is different things to different people.
Love that bridge and love that connection.
You know,
That's one I totally back that up.
You know, and people like to think of, it's kind of like our conversation before. Like I was like trying to understand the whole pronoun thing, and trying to understand and sorry, I don't know it actually off by heart, but the LGBTQ, and we joke about it, ABC, you know, EFG, but actually we don't like being mocked as a people, so why would we mock another group of whom are actually a big part of our people, all of us? So I think, and I've always thought that I didn't carry bias, but hello, I definitely carry bias. I did, and I probably still do carry some judgment and bias about our own people. Like I'm a lot more sensitive to seeing our people on the corners homeless or washing windscreens. But that's one side of our people that we see. But we've got this whole amazing side of Te Ao Māori. But I think there's a shift in mainstream media, but you know, it's like, yeah. So going all over the place, but just having these conversations around trying not to judge, trying not to have bias, and trying, and like well-being, people think it's this warm and fuzzy bullshit, but actually if we were really intentional about it, it could really make some changes, like some amazing changes. And there's all this data that says that it does make amazing changes, but people need to actually believe that it can make the change.
And what would your, like, if you have to give people like 3 little pieces of advice to help them make that change, or to get them to think about what that change could look like for them, what would it be?
Or even just to start creating conversations for themselves.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking. It's what brings you joy. It's what brings you joy. So what brings you joy? Okay, really think about what brings you joy. And I know people are probably going to roll their eyes because a few people that know me know that I love being active. But being active, whatever that looks like to you, is really important from a scientific, kind of adrenaline perspective, because it actually helps with a lot of other things. So if we're talking about a holistic model or holistic approach to your well-being, you actually do need to do something physically active, even if that's making a beautiful pottery dish at a, but it needs to be something tactile.
Yeah.
To find out what that is, like I said, what brings you joy, and then being unashamedly open about your pūmanawa. So go there. So what are your God-given talents? And I learnt that word from Pānia Papa, actually, from Rangi, because our whole bracket in 2004 was around pūmanawa. But yeah, around pūmanawa. Pūmanawa being your tūpuna God-given talents, because we've all got them. Every single one of us. But somewhere along the line, we're told that they are not adequate. We are more than adequate. Like I sit here today and say to you, people are probably still trying to figure out what it is that I do for mahi, but I am one of New Zealand's Aotearoa's leading wellbeing consultant and designers. And it actually feels really uncomfortable saying that, but we've got to say it. If you're good at something, then say you're good at something. And it's not about being whakahihi. Because if I can say I'm really good at something and people go, oh, right, well, I know to go and talk to her. Well, then, yes, it is about, pūtea, but actually ultimately it's about making real change in communities, right? Yeah. It really is about me. Like, let's be honest, I want to be, somebody called me the Māori Oprah the other day.
Oh, right? Shit.
I want to be that.
You already are that.
I want to sit in Vector Arena and speak to tens of thousands of people.
Let's make it happen.
And, that's the big bodacious goal. What I'm aware of is I must always remember where I came from and all those different people that helped me to get there, because you never get there on your own.
I was gonna up you for that, because you've got for me, there's a lot of people that I've heard in academia, and especially in academic spaces, that don't actually have this gift of understanding who gifted them their knowledge. And you like to a T, you're like February 2012, this person, and you're naming dropping these. Like, I swear, I've only met another academic that I've seen witness do that effortlessly, and I feel like that's a real gift that you have, because I'm not I know that other people can do it in different spaces and places, but it just rolls off your tongue. Like, that's a talent that I don't see a lot of. So I'm really I'm gonna uplift that, because I can see that, and if I can see it, it means that I've got it in me somewhere. But I don't know if people uplift you enough for that. But like, another critique could be like, oh, you're name dropping people, but for me, I'm like, you're tracing your genealogy of intelligence.
I mean, those people that, I mentioned Lisa and I mentioned Harata, but over the last 2 years, I've people like Che Wilson, Missy Takanawa, Nina Keitane Tinaro. I just have to, her and I have been friends for a very long time now, she's inspired me on just so many levels. First time, she was the one that got me my first Zumba instructor job at City Fitness, you know. I was working full-time and a single mother and doing instructing, you know. It was great. I loved it, actually. My poor kids, dragged them from pillar to poster on every Zumba kind of thing. But Nina Kei, Tanu Tinaro, Gail Bosman Watene, who's really taught me to lean into those uncomfortable spaces, because from then come the most growth. So that's another learning, actually, if I was to give, you know, 4 now, would be one is to lean into those uncomfortable spaces, because from there comes the most growth.
Yeah.
You know, her husband, Apa Watene, I mean, they've all been amazing. Ariana Paul and Tama Pōtaka, you know, we've done work with them. But I also have to acknowledge my darling Nikora Narapo, who really has given me so much, because, I mean, that guy, he's just so open about what he's good at, which I actually love, but I really struggled with when I first started seeing him. But, you know, he's given me a lot of courage, you know, to do what I want to do. People like Rose Masters, Jackie Tamaki, Hera Waitai. Oh, I always call her Waitai. What is it? Oh, shit, she's going to kill me later. But you know who I'm talking about, Hera. Te Kurupa. I got it, Hera Te Kurupa. But, you know, all those people, and there's people that I've probably missed along the way, you know, but there have been pivotal people like Poko Moyo and Pania Papa, Awhimai Hoka, Bentham Ohia, Kate Sherrington, who really gave me that foundational space. And I think that, you know, some people blossom at 25. Some people have big shining lights at 25. Some people have them at 16. Some people have them at 30. And some people have them at 48. Mine just happens to arrive at 50 or 51, right? The other thing is, don't judge a book by their age if we're talking about bias. But I'm just like, yeah, you know what? I can kind of sing. God,
you're gonna have to rephrase that for me, because I'm not getting any lacking from you today. Okay, well, I can sing is what I want.
I can sing. Awhimai Hoka. She mightn't be here anymore physically, but she's still around.
You can, well, she can gift you with your voice.
You know, I can sing, and I am really good at my job, and I care a lot about the community, and I care a lot about our people. Like, if I could shift Māori, and this is my thing, I feel still intimidated by Māori spaces because I can't kōrero Māori, and but I'm learning to put that aside, because my wairua, my heart, my manawa is in the right place. Is in the right place, and I think if there's one thing, is that wairua and listening te he tohu tēnā, you know, when you get signs, is to try to listen to them, because if you don't, they just seem to come down and do something nasty on your ass. So then you've suddenly got to go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I heard. It's like, if Oprah talks about it, but she talks about it in a different kind of way. She says it's like this whisper that starts, and you hear it, but you think, it's kind of over there. It's just a whisper. But the whisper gets louder and louder and louder, and it's like the signs that our tupuna send us, or our ancestors. They give you signs, and they'll do it subtly, but after a while they're like, fuck you need to listen. Bam.
Here you go.
Yeah.
They will stop you. They will stop you in your tracks.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they'll pause you if you're not listening. Like, from my experience, I'm like, okay, I'm not actually listening.
Yeah.
And they've taken away my ankles. They've taken away my knees. Like, you know, they've found different ways to pause me, but they will pause you if you don't listen.
Well, yeah. And, you know, I mean, there's been, you know, lots of things along the way that I've felt, oh my God, just so heartbreaking, you know. But I think you've got to, it hasn't all been bloody stars and twinkles and, you know, aroha.
Well, I feel like you spoke right at the beginning about the aroha and the love of your koro and your grandparents. So to me, I feel like that's, I just hear that all through your journey. The love. And it's like, if you can speak about all of those traumatic spaces with love, I'm like, yo, you've done the inner work.
For sure.
we can
And
see.
we can see that, yeah.
Yeah.
But the question I want to lean into
Yes.
before we get into the whāki, your what's in your whāki list, is tell us about your woo community, because I feel like that's something that you've created a space for, and that's something that I'm like, oh, okay. Did you want to plug it in, anything like that?
Yeah.
When I was at the wānanga, we did a thing called Strength Finders. And Strength Finders basically tells you your 5, or actually your 30. It gives you values of 30, but what your top 5 or top 10 intrinsic strengths are that are a part of your makeup and who you are. And so when my top 5 are communication, and these are in order: communication, woo, positivity, includer and empathy, strategic, activator, ideator. I can't remember the other 2, but it's funny because when I first read them, I was like, oh yeah, heck, that's kind of scary how accurate they were. So, and the word woo, I wanted that, if I'm being honest, to be my number 1. So in my world, it is number 1. So woo is an ability to walk into a room, and just suddenly have people do things that they wouldn't normally want to do. So woo I have this intrinsic ability to make people feel really comfortable, to make people really like me a lot of the time, and to actually make people still move in uncomfortable spaces, and they don't kind of realize they're doing it. It's kind of a superpower. It is a superpower, actually. And so when I formed Woo, 3 years ago now, Woo Wellbeing, I had a couple of things in mind. I wanted to be a shit hot, amazing consultant in the wellbeing space in the corporate environment. And I felt like being Māori, I could bring a lot to that space. I don't know if they're ready for it, but, I've had some quite good successes in that.
They are.
Yeah. And then 2, I was going to bed one night and thought, man, I really loved Red Table Korero. And she always had these amazing people, right,
Incredible.
on the show. But I was like, actually, what if you did it from a community level and you featured community superstars? And then I realised every superstar is a community superstar anyway, right? And every person's a community person. So I went to Pua Phillips, who's amazing, and said to her, hey, I came up with this idea. She's always been my soundboard. And she said, yeah, I reckon you should call it Woo Table Korero, Woo Tipu Korero. And I was like, okay. So I've been doing that now 2 years, just over 2 years. And what that is about featuring particularly women, but I do anyone really. I just kind of go with it. I feel my way through a lot of things. And so we created Woo Table Korero, and we host that once a month, either in person or online. And I've interviewed probably over 60 women or 60 people, and probably had over 200 or 300 people come through. They're kind of an event that I always want them to be bigger. Like, I'm like, why aren't these bigger and better? And I suppose it's a question I need to ask myself. But so we've just officially got sponsor from Marawatia here, which is a branch of the Women's Welfare League here in Kirikiriroa. So they've sponsored the ones in Hamilton. We're going to Auckland for the first time on the 30th of April. So we're hosting a Woo Table Korero up there.
Wow.
Next month will be online. So this year we're taking a different approach. We're going to do Kirikiriroa, Hamilton online, and then Tāmaki, and then we're going to repeat that. So I think we're doing 9 all up this year, maybe 10. Yeah, 10 all up this year, once a month. And next month, not quite sure, but on April the 30th, we're having Dr. Henny Moyau to speak. And we're probably we've also spoken to Jolene Prophet about coming back, because they've both worked in the mental health and wellbeing space. And that's a real thing right now. So that's the Woo Table Korero. And then in March a few years ago, I had an idea about, I was on the New Zealand Health and Wellbeing Leadership group. And they were all leaders within the wellbeing space, within corporates. And I was kind of like, but where do we actually get the bigger group? You know, where's the kind of people that are up and coming or new to this space? Should we not include them? Anyway, that group dissolved, and so I kickstarted, along with Pua Phillips and Tim Mertens, Rangi, the Wellbeing Collective of, and I have to acknowledge Tim because he's put in so much work, but over 200 companies are part of Rangi Collective. We have a hui once a month online about various things. We've got one coming up next Friday, and anyone that's working in it's predominantly corporate wellbeing space is more than welcome to attend, or those that have an interest. And it's just 1 hour once a month. We are looking to go to a subscription model, and last year we did a few masterclass workshops. But that's different. And that whole idea was, I was getting approached by a lot of people who are up and coming in the wellbeing space to kind of mentor them. And I thought, oh my God, I can't mentor all of them. So how do I do that without mentoring everybody individually? So I said, how about we start this collective? It's kind of, so it's more of a corporate environment collective, but yeah, that's what I do. And at the moment, we're just scoping out. Currently, there's no specific awards, anything for wellbeing. So just scoping that out, and also scoping out, and I'm going to say this, it's not PC, but wellbeing conferences. Just about everyone I've been to, except for one, you have to sit on your nono all day. And we're talking to people about not sitting on their nono all day because we know that's not good for their wellbeing. Then we have a whole lot of speakers who get up and speak at us. And a lot of what they have to say is actually really interesting. But a lot of them are, it's very corporate. And so we're looking to deliver a conference that's more diverse, multicultural, and reflective of a much wider New Zealand, and all the things that are being done out, not just in the corporate space, but outside as well. So I'm a big ideator, and I just need to acknowledge Dorothy McLaughlin and Marcelina Saul and Wendy Joe and Max Riley and so Angela Simmons, Grant Pritchard, who really have been instrumental in kind of going along with these crazy ass ideas that I sometimes get. But yeah, that's kind of my woo community is both very corporate. It's very, if we're going to put it into kind of circles, not boxes. I've got the woo corporate space, so where I deliver corporate wellbeing or help companies. I actually like collaborating more than I actually like going in and telling them what to do, because I want the people's voices to be heard.
Yeah, for sure.
So I get the employees to kind of tell us what they want, and then make management believe that that's the right, because that was our idea, and then all of a sudden it's amazing. And then
when they could have done that themselves.
Yeah, and then I do Woo Table Korero, and then I do Rangi Wellbeing Collective. So, and I've done a lot of things for a lot of love, and I've realised, and I spoke to this the other night, I said, I had this real my own shit about putia and abundance in my life, and not feeling like I was deserving of it. And it's probably been in the last 6 months that I've thought, oh, fuck that. I actually do need to make money and be very successful in what I do and be abundant. And abundance to me actually isn't just about money. It's about actually people and kai, and it's okay to be abundant. It's okay to make money, because if I can do that, then I can actually have a further reach.
Yeah, for sure.
And so do I have an ego? Yes, I do have an ego. It's taken me a long time, and you know what? That's the first time I've said that. So I've always been worried about people having puhai or worrying about what other people think. And to be honest, I still do. But now I think I'm just in a space of like, I can't really be fucked with all that too much, because it actually gets in the way of allowing my light to truly shine and really make the impact that I want to make. And if my light shines, then both your lights will shine and everyone else's. So when I leave a room, like last Wednesday night when we did the workshop, which I don't know if it was really a workshop or what it was, but it was wonderful, whatever it was. Well, I thought it was wonderful. But it's not just about leaving people with learnings. It's actually about leaving them with a feeling. So, you can say, I learnt this, but also, man, I remember the way she made me feel.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually, I think it comes back to, you know how you alluded to, and probably now that I'm talking, I'm realizing that I'm being quite wairua driven in a lot of things. That's probably why I want to leave people feeling amazing, like they're every single one of them is amazing. So when people say to me, oh, well, I don't really know what my pumanawa is, I could say to you right now, your beautiful blue eyes and your amazing hair and you got a lovely ahua. Those are, there's a start for you, right?
That ahua we are asleep on.
Yeah. But, it's about stretching people. I think I'm learning that you've got to stretch yourself and you've got to stretch others, And actually sitting here today, I've had a big epiphany about, I think I told you I was really struggling with a person in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've realized, I think because, some of what I thought were, I'm confronted by what may have been my own behaviours.
Oh.
Okay, let's take a deep breath there. No, that's a powerful reflection.
Yeah.
We
Huge.
reward that.
Yeah.
Ooh.
It wasn't until I spoke it. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, there it is. That's what it is. But, it's been
That's
opened. And I'm, people talk about journaling. And I'm not I can't do it every day. I'm just, I can do it every day, reframe. I can do it every day, but I choose not to because I just find it too much sometimes. But every now and then it's good to actually reflect. One thing I do try to do a daily practice of is as I go to sleep, I'm really great. I'm thankful for what the day brought me today, whatever it is. Both challenging and good, So,
All right, so we're coming to our end.
Yes,
What's in
sir.
our whākū conversation list? So what are some topics that you think is in the whākū that you'd like to bring to the front? That have been waiting. So either for yourself or for the communities around you, what are some topics in the whākū that you'd like more amplification or more highlights towards? Apart from, because I feel like all of the things that we've discussed are pretty whākū conversations.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd like to understand why mainstream New Zealand have such a high level of entitlement.
Sorry, we weren't ready for that. No, say that again, please. Say that again.
God.
We weren't ready for that.
Let's just
Go there.
Can you say
go
that
there.
again?
Why some of mainstream Aotearoa New Zealand have such a high level of entitlement. And why I say that is because it upsets me as I kind of increase my knowledge. And, for me, I don't know a lot of our atua. I don't know a terribly lot about our wars, but I know our Māori land wars. But, just take, the latest thing that's happened with, with politics and Māori wars. And I just think, how much more do you want to take of us? Like, how much more do you want to see us decimated? When actually we're not decimating at all, we're actually growing. The reality of Aotearoa moving forward is that it's going to be a lot browner because our population, in terms of Pasifika and Māori, are growing. And so more and more we're going to be confronted with having to change our terrible, antiquated thought process. And, now they're talking about the Māori wards being a system of apartheid. Well, I spoke to you both about, so when was it okay for them to come down onto land and survey it without permission? And then when we didn't want to give it over, start wars because that gave them an excuse to take it.
Yeah.
Because we then became criminals.
In their eyes.
Yeah, and the other thing that was probably alarming to them, and I don't have a lot of knowledge of this, and I'm not, I'm not saying but is we were incredibly entrepreneurial. And what we still don't hear to these days is that, you know, like people talk about the domestic violence in Māori households. Can I tell you that there is just as much violence happening in middle white New Zealand, but they don't report it because there's more of a shame associated to it because they want to maintain an image, right?
100%.
Right. Then there's also kind of the health stats, okay? So, I mean, I think there's a lot of real positive things. That the sooner we have a health system run by Māori for Māori, the better. Because I think that we'll be moving in a much more proactive space. I mean, what I'm saying now could be deemed as controversial, but I'm actually just probably speaking a whole lot of truths. Our education system is set up for a very small group of kids to be successful, right? And so I think that the Rahui, COVID, has given us an opportunity to really rethink and revisit some of these antiquated, archaic systems that are currently in place around health and education in particular. And you can call me a warm and fuzzy wellbeing consultant. You can call me what you like, but I'm getting shit done, right? There's a lot of us getting shit done, actually.
You're actioning in a space where people are pausing. And then I think that's something that I really recognize, is that because some people have already done the inner work and some people have already done some of the reflections, the deep and meaningful reflections that actually and leaned into the uncomfortable spaces. We're able to action in a place where the masses are pausing because this is the first time they've ever been baffled with a different narrative.
Absolutely. And like, you know, I mean, everybody knows that if you're a Pacifica or especially if you're a boy, if you're Pacifica and you're male or Māori, and because you're deemed as disruptive in class, when actually, you might actually be highly intelligent, you're actually bored by what the shit's being taught at you.
Oh, trust and believe,
so
that's what happened.
I think that the sooner we have New Zealand history taught, the better, so that we can actually create a society that's more open-minded and actually more accepting of who we are. Oh, that probably didn't sound right, but not accepting, but just like stop with the bullshit. There's no apartheid happening here. And if there was apartheid happening, my God, it's been happening for 200 years.
Yeah, 100%.
But when we flip it, and, you know, big ups to Nanaia Mahuta. I mean, I'm not a Labour Party voter, just saying, but and neither am I National. But I just
Greens, not
no, not even them. I love them too. But yeah, it just boggles my mind.
Yeah, I think often when equity feels like oppression, it's because you've been in a position of privilege for far too long.
Well, can I tell you, you know, I talked about how when I was in Melbourne, I could have been any nationality, right? It didn't matter. It didn't matter what my name was. And because there were so many, you know, different names, it didn't matter. It's been a shock to me how I have encountered certain things living back in Aotearoa, or automatically pushed into your name's Māori, so therefore there's already a preconceived idea. And that this is why, I don't know if you know, but a lot of people, if you ask the way that I dress, people will say I'm a little bit different, There's things I like to do which really challenge spaces, because also I was brought up with a very posh grandmother who was very well mannered, and etiquette was everything in my house with my mother and my grandmother. And so those kind of things, you know, you can hold yourself in the same spaces and same places, but I'm Indigenous and I'm Māori, you know, and asking somebody how much Māori they are, right?
Trash.
When the fuck do we ever say how much Irish are you, or English are you, or Scottish are you,
Never.
or Welsh are you?
Yeah.
Blood quantum, that's such a bad, like that's bullshit, man.
Don't even get me started on that bullshit, right? Because that's in America too. They have to do that. So I think that I think that there's a change that's coming, and I feel like it's coming. And I
agree.
really feel like what's happening with COVID, and I really feel for our whānau and Tāmaki Makaurau. I really, really do, because many of us have family there. But it's almost like there's tohu that are being given to us, and for whatever reason, and, you know, people are trying to revert back to pre-COVID. It's not going to happen, people. Life and everything has changed.
Yeah, already.
Yeah.
And I feel like in a way it's kind of like you're not living in the now and you're not living in reality if you have this utopian of being like, oh, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. And I'm like, no, this is normal.
This is normal now.
This is what's happening. And I feel like that's why I really am a believer in storytelling, because I feel like the stories that we have been telling have preceded what all of the discourse has like aligned itself to erase. And I feel like because I'm still here, my political stance is that I'm alive. I'm the representative of my ancestors in a human form and in a body that lives. And in the way that I look at things, I'm like, this enoughness, I'm only perpetuating that.
Yeah.
Like,
and Wu Table Korero is really people telling their stories.
that's it.
It's a vehicle for people to tell their stories. Yes, they talk about their careers and what have you and all their successes, but that's really, it's a storytelling, you know. And I think that we in particular, Pacifica and Māori, are incredibly good at storytelling, you know. But I will tell you that I think I shared with you my grandmother's story the other night. You know, that's an amazing story of
Beautiful.
my grandmother Makazak,
incredible.
you know. So everybody's got a story, and I think that it's about being open to those stories. And I think that I want Māori and Pacifica and any other colour or any other culture, we're not just good enough, we're amazing. We're actually, everyone, no matter your background, no matter your culture, you're Scandinavian, right? You look like a bloody Viking goddess. But, you know, we are all pretty amazing. Yep, there are definitely uncomfortable spaces, and I never used to like being in them. I used to always be talking about sparkles, but you've got to go there.
Have to.
You've got to go there. Hey.
All right, so you sparked us up with your waiata, and would you please just gift us again? Because I feel like your waiata really evoked something in this space, and I feel like we need that back just to close it up so that we can, you know, go on the rest of our day and have a kai as well.
Yeah,
I'm so excited.
I know. Well, should I close us?
Yes, please.
Oh my gosh. Okay, for all the reals.
I can sing.
Yes, and I'm going to do this confidently. I can hear my gorgeous niece, Kiri Tahanga Months, who's been incredibly patient with me learning te reo. Okay. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai. O tō tātou ariki a ihu, karaiti. Me te aroha o te atua nui. Me te whiwhina tahitanga ki te wairoa tapu. Ake, ake, amine. Ake, ake, amine.
Beautiful.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
If people want to connect with you, how can they do that? Do you have socials? Or?
Oh, yes, sorry, I didn't even talk. A Wu Way of Life on Instagram, so hashtag a Wu Way of Life, and also on Facebook, a Wu Way of Life. Otherwise, we do have a website, but I think it's a little old at the moment. So
Did you mean to do it? Woo Way of Life, www?
No, I didn't.
Woo Wellbeing, as I guess.
Well, it came to me actually when I was back home over Christmas, over the holidays. back at my auntie's place, which sits on our original Ohia Papakoinga. So yeah, it just came to me, a wee way of life. So yeah, so a wee way of life, and also www.wellbeing.co.nz. But yeah, you can drop us anything, get in touch with us there, and yeah, I need to get more onto it with these Woo Table events so that people know they're actually happening. And if you are a part of Woo Way of Life, then turn on your notifications. My advice to you.
A real shameless plug.
Thank you so much for coming through. We really appreciate it. And thanks for sharing your stories with us.
Thank you so much for this time and this space. I feel like we could keep on talking.
Right?
We will be over food.
All right then, thank you. Thank you.
Kia
Nā
ora.
mihi korua.
Ka kite whānau. Thank you so much. The fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
Fuck you. The fuck you.
Fuck you. Fuck you.
Bye.